Shalom and welcome to this week's Living Torah. As we get to the last Torah portion of the book of Genesis. Yet it's not just 2025, and so far it is 7 days into the month, and I am on a track record of 100% of putting down 2025 on everything. But pride comes before a fall, so maybe by the end of the day I'll mess up. We'll see. I have a special favor to ask of all of you, and part of it is I would really appreciate your response if you would. I say that knowing that in this day that we live in, very few people, and this is not condemnation, this is just kind of a fact of the place we are in life with social media, with an overload of information, of things coming at us all the time. Asking for a comment or response to something is it's normally not done. Okay, but with that, I'm going to ask anyway. In a couple weeks, the 24th, 25th, 26th of this month of January, I will be, Bezrat Hashem, God willing, I will be up in Pennsylvania, outside of Harrisburg. I have asked them to please import some warm weather. They laughed at me on that one, but we'll see. But I'll be up there doing a youth young adult conference. And let me put it to you like this, ladies and gentlemen, we are one generation away from this whole quote unquote movement being over. I'm still in contact. I'm not doing a lot of the conferences, some of the conferences I used to do, but I'm in contact with quite a few of the youth. I see what's going on, and they're not real impressed right now. Now, I've been working at this as part of this walk, whatever you want to call it. Okay, the names are ridiculous sometimes. But I've fought for this for about 25 years of my life, and what I see is that once again we are one generation away from all that we've tried to do being gone. Now I got it that the Almighty He has spoken the word, so it's not up to us. But yes, it is that we need to be a part. We need to be an active part. And so I'm going up to Pennsylvania. There's also something I'll be talking more about in coming months regarding another avenue that we've, as a ministry, myself, been asked to be a part of regarding youth. And I'm so thankful to those who are generous in giving to this ministry that, when you're talking about youth events, a lot of times that's just, it's just, well, the one I'll be involved in later in the year, there's no offering there because it's, when you're doing a youth event, it is pretty much, they're just trying to pay the bills. There's not a lot of money in the room for offerings. And so because of your faithfulness, I never have to ask. I don't believe there's been one time in 25 years of, for Joy to Hashem, coming up on about 22 years, I don't ask. I made a rule years ago. I'll never ask how many people are going to be there and what the offering is going to be. But it's because of your faithfulness, and I thank you for that. All that to say, I'm doing a conference that's I'm literally, as I explained last night on the conference call, I'm throwing the box away. Coloring outside the lines of the coloring page. No, we're just burning the book. Okay, we're destroying the whole thing into a totally different type of a conference based upon this concept of talking with them, not talking at them. And so I don't know what this is going to look like exactly. And I say all of this in the first 5 minutes of this program to say this: I would appreciate your prayers. And if you will commit to pray during those days of the 24th, 25th, and 26th for youth and young adults that you don't even know. Right? You don't even know them. But I would ask, I need people that would be praying during that time and praying prior to. So, send me an email, put a link, a comment or somewhere on something, send a carrier pigeon, whatever you want to do. There's almost enough snow for a dog sled. So with that, thank you, and let's get into this week's Torah portion. It says that Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, and Yaakov lived to be 147 years old. First of all, imagine that 147 years is in that's like, dying and you're at the age of adolescence almost. He's not old, considering the age of some of his ancestors. That, not too distant ancestors either. But the word is he lived is not just he was existing. All right, here he is about, what is it? He gets there, he's 130 years old. He's got 17 years in Egypt. Well, obviously he's just retired and doing nothing. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The word there, he lived, is actually he made known his life. And it is interesting that it says, and Jacob lived. It doesn't say Israel lived, but Jacob lived. What is this meaning? What is all of this? We wrap this up is that he continued to declare the life that he had lived as the person Jacob. So this is kind of my speculation, reading between the lines here, that he told his children, his grandchildren, and now probably, he's getting into great-grandchildren somewhere along the way. He is relaying to them, and this will be brought out later on, he is relaying to them what it was to be Jacob, the making of the man. He was passing on to his ancestor, or to his children, his grandchildren. He was passing on the life of being Jacob unto them. He didn't just sit back. I had a call from a wonderful lady yesterday. She said, "Mike, I'll just kind of code this. She's over 90 years old, and she said, I can't get around. They're not letting me drive." Wonderful, but she said, "I've started writing, and I'm going to be sending you a book that I've written." I'm like, you're that age, and you're still trying to figure out ways to pass your life on to future generations. Kol hakavod, more power to you that you haven't just decided to sit in a rocking chair, which is to me one of the most frustrating items of furniture that's ever been built, because there's a lot of movement, but you never go anywhere. And that's kind of what a lot of people feel that they've gotten to in retirement, is they just cease to do anything except going through the very, very basic motions of life. Now, okay, let me get past that into chapter 48. And this is the account of Jacob as he's bringing these two boys, Ephraim and Manasseh, before him. And he says to Joseph, "I am adopting them." There's no conversation. There's no, "Hey, Joseph, I'd like to ask your permission about something." He says, "No, I am adopting them as my own." Now, why is this important? Because as long as they remained as Joseph's sons, they were half Hebrew and half Egyptian. So how are they going to turn out? Are they going to be Egyptian Hebrews or Hebrew Egyptians? Kind of like we have in the United States today. We have very few Jewish Americans. We have a lot of American Jews, which is, it is stating your allegiance, where your allegiance is first. So Jacob is taking that out of the equation. And he is saying, as far as these boys go, they're no longer Egyptian heritage. I am adopting them fully, completely, legally as if they were born from my own seed. This is important for us to understand because, again, there is so much confusion within Messianic Hebrew roots congregations and Messianic Judaism and all of these things, that somehow we are a mixed multitude that's, still out in exile. Guys, according to the scripture, the way that I read it, it doesn't matter what my background is. I had an interesting conversation with a person in Israel the other day. I was putting in a donation through an organization that we use just for the fact of making it easy to get money. I'm not giving the organization specifically. But there was a little confusion on one time in the donation I'd use my first name, the other time I'd use my middle name. And they're like, we have two people with the same name. Could you explain this? And it began to be this email conversation about this. And I got to explain how my granddad was, he was assimilated. And so I don't know where this conversation may go to in the future. But how do you look at yourself? All right, let me ask you a question. How do you look at yourself? Do you consider yourself as kind of an American Hebrew, a Messianic Hebrew? What is it? Or have you come to the realization that you are adopted 100%, completely and totally into a family called Israel? Now, with these two boys, Ephraim and Manasseh, we see that Yaakov is crossing his arms on that. What is he doing? He is making the ancient paleo symbol for the letter Tav, which is the letter of the covenant. It is a mark. It is a sign. And so he is literally in a natural realm declaring what he is doing in a spiritual realm. Getting back to that in just a moment, as he explains his life, I found it interesting when I read this, that in verse 15, it says, then he blessed Joseph, the Elohim of whose presence my fathers Abraham and Isaac lived, the Elohim who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day. So at the end of his life, what has he found? In his relationship with his Creator, what has he found? What is he keyed in on? Okay, is he the God of provision? Well, he's provided a lot. Is he the God of miracles? Okay, consider the speckled and striped sheep or goats, but consider all the things that have been done. Is he the one who goes forth in battle for him? What does he come to at the end of his life? He is my shepherd. I think that David understood that along the way. But I want to go into something just briefly here. The word shepherd, and it's not translated like this in King James and others, but should be, in my opinion, translated shepherd. It is Resh Ein Hey. It is pronounced Ray, or Ra, I guess. It would be better, Ra. But if I started looking at if we go down to the roots of this word, the root is a Resh and an Ein, which is the word evil. So here's my take on this, that the letter Hey is about his breath, his authority. He breathed his word into this world. He breathed his breath into Adam and Eve. He breathes his breath. When we are born again, to use an old term, we are redeemed. He breathes his breath into us. Without that breath, we are able to, and we are likely to become our own evil shepherd. See, there's one thing that keeps us from walking in evil, and that is his breath. That is his word. That is his authority. And so this is why I thought stumbled onto something this year. It ends up being very very important to a number of people, actually. Is I put up on Facebook that I was going to be reading the book of Proverbs in the month of January. This is not something this is something I've done numerous times through the years. There are 31 chapters of Proverbs. There is 31 days in January. This is a book of wisdom. My prayer is, as Solomon's, that I would have wisdom to lead his people. And so I figured the best way to begin my Gregorian year, I could say this natural realm year, is with a book that reminds me of what it is to walk in wisdom. So I put this on Facebook and challenge people, and I've been to read Proverbs, and I've been posting daily a verse that was important to me. I think today was the first time I even made a real commentary to that, but I'm trying to just let the word speak for the word. But as we read those first chapters, and it talks about this this prostitute woman, this harlot, it's easy for us to miss the point. Which the point is that this is a dichotomy between godly wisdom and worldly wisdom. And worldly wisdom is likened to a harlot, a prostitute, who leads you astray. So I've just been posting this, and I've heard from more than one person in this 7 days. Thank you. Thank you for doing this, because I have become lax in reading the scripture on a daily basis. You know, I would hope, I would pray that, and I've got something for February too. I would hope and pray that and this is going to be about a 45-day project. It is said that if you do something for 30 days, I think it is, that it becomes a habit. No. When it comes to, maybe brushing your teeth or something else, 30 days, you got pretty much a habit. But when it comes to spiritual things, of prayer, of scripture reading, there is no amount of a lifetime that you can do that it becomes a habit in my estimation. Okay, maybe you figured it out. I haven't. It is something that you have to be consistent about. I was listening to a podcast by a non-messianic. I don't normally do that, but he says that somewhere along his life, somebody told him, I don't eat until I read scripture. Well, maybe if that worked for you, okay. I think I'm personally, I don't need to bribe myself. I need to discipline myself. That one of the first things that I do on a daily basis, almost every day, is I open the Word and read something. That doesn't mean I have to read 10 chapters. Sometimes it may be after I get through with Proverbs and what I'm going to in February. It may be just a few verses. It may be that you read 5 verses, 2 verses, 1 verse, and you hear the Spirit say, that's all I want you to read today. Okay, it's not about a formula, a system. It's about, this is my breath. This is the air I breathe, that song. This is what I'm receiving from Him, His breath being breathed into my life, so that I would have breath that would keep me from becoming my own evil shepherd. And we all have that tendency, do we not? So, okay, moving on. Yosef, in these, starting in verse 18, I'm not going to read all of these verses, but I know that you're going to. Yosef said to his father, "Don't do it this way, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." What's happening here is that Yosef is concerned. Okay, he's the one that was sold into slavery. He's the one that has had to deal with this firstborn blessing issue. He knows the jealousy that it brought forth in the family and the price that he paid for that. And so simply he's saying to his father, I don't trust my brother's actions yet. I hear their words, but I'm not at the place of trusting their actions. And Yaakov says, it's okay. That's the way it's going to be. Now, the reverse of this is over in chapter 50, when you read these the last words of this Torah portion, in that the brothers come to Yosef and come up with this cockamamie story that their father said privately to them, when I die, go to Joseph and say, let's don't have any hard feelings about this thing. There is a trust issue that is in the family. Did I say then, or am I saying now? The answer, you got it, is yes. There is a trust issue here. And I have to tell you quite bluntly, the reason that there is a trust issue in this family to this day is because a lot of people can't be trusted. Okay? If you have a ministry and you have more listening to your podcast or your stream or whatever than somebody else, guess what? Or you have a teaching that somebody doesn't agree with. It may be scriptural, but if it threatens their quote-unquote ministry, if it threatens their teaching, if it is a revelation that would take us farther into this place of restoration, I can guarantee you that people will come after you. How do I know that? History. It just happens that people become jealous. And when if you have something and people gravitate to it, there are those that will try their best to take you down. I've seen that. I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to give examples, but I have seen that. There is a trust issue. Why? Because there are people in this family today that are not trustworthy. They have more jealousy in their life than faithfulness to the message. All right, I'm going to leave that alone and move on. In chapter 49, we see what is called the blessings that is given to the boys. Well, I have to disagree that over in Deuteronomy, Devarim, it is the blessings. These are just the words, okay? These are the words of correction that are given to the boy. This is correction. These are the words of revelation of who these boys actually are. And I'm not going to go through each one specifically. I made a promise a month or so ago that I'm going to come back and I'm going to teach on the 12 tribes of Israel. It's still a promise. I'm just working on the timing right now, and I'm going to get to it. I've got to get through the month of January. I've got a number of things happening. I'm going to try to start on this in February and see how it works out, because it's about 5 hours of teaching that I'll break up over a few month period. So it may, as I release this, it may be over even a 6-month time period. I'm not sure, but depending on whatever happens in the world. So it's still on the table that I'm trying to do this. And the reason why is because locked into these words of Genesis and the words of Deuteronomy is a revelation of our identity. Understanding our identity is very important for addressing behavior, lifestyle, all kinds of things in driving us to our destination. Now, it begins with words I've spoken through the years. I've read through the years. Chapter 49, verse 1, Then Yaakov called for his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, and I will tell you what will happen to you in the Acharit Hayamim, in the last days. Okay, I guess we got a question. Are we living in that time? Well, if not, it's a pretty good dress rehearsal for it, which means we're getting closer. When you start doing dress rehearsals, that means that you're closer to the event. Assemble yourselves and listen, sons of Jacob. Pay attention to Israel, your father. Simply put, he is going to speak to them as a person who has had an encounter with the Almighty in his own life that has caused him to become a different person than who he was originally. He is going to go from, let me slow that down, from Jacob the supplanter, and I can make a pretty good argument for the reasoning for his life in his life with Esau. But let's face it, in the end, his life is full of some conniving, a little manipulation when is needed. Was that he was walking in faith or walking in his own power, trying to manipulate things to his own good? I'll leave that for the final jury, which will be actually the final judge. There will be no jury involved. So he is speaking to them as a man who has now come to a place of faith in the Almighty as the man Israel, not as the man Yaakov. But he is, I believe, and I'll get to that statement in a moment. So let me just go through each one of these tribes, and I want to break it down to a very simple statement regarding each one of them. You might want to grab a pen, paper, whatever, and write these down, because what I'd like you to do as you go through them, and as you go through these words or brief statements later, is ask yourself, which one of these do I relate to more? Which one of these relates to me more? Who am I out of these boys? Which one of these would I likely to be, their sibling? All right, how do I compare myself? And I'd like you to do something. Try to do this in an honest manner. I posted something years ago. The greatest friend we have in the world is an honest mirror. The book of Yaakov, James, it talks about a man who looks in a mirror and sees himself, and then disregards what he sees and walks away, which means he walks away unchanged. The purpose of our mirror is so that we can see ourselves. It's the only place we can see ourselves. It's kind of a funny thing. I look at myself every week. I've got a camera, the small screen, and a monitor right there. But for many years, centuries, people didn't have this kind of technology. You couldn't take your phone and take a selfie. So the only way you knew what you looked like was to look maybe in a creek bed with water. We see copper mirrors that were made in the time of the tabernacle. A mirror was not just something you didn't see yourself on a daily basis, and you didn't have something that was of the technology that we do now that you can see yourself. You ever been to a hotel that has a magnifying mirror? Those things are scary. I mean, it's one thing to see yourself in a mirror, but to look over and go, what is that? And then you figure out, it's me. Oh no, I didn't know that was there. This is what the scripture is trying to teach us, in this thing of looking at ourselves in a mirror honestly, instead of making excuses for things. Well, that's just who I am. And that never brings forth Israel from Yaakov. It leaves us as a natural realm person. Okay, so maybe I've harped on that enough that you can, let's take an honest look. So Reuben, what is Reuben best known for? It is that he climbed into his concubine's couch, but it says you're unstable as water, and which means he is a person of compromise. We just came through a season. Okay, let's face it, December is a month. Are we people of conviction, or are we people of compromise? Which one is it? Okay, so Reuben is a person that's constantly compromising with people, trying to keep the peace, which is, instead of being a peacemaker, as the scripture says in Matthew, that Yeshua says, instead of being a peacemaker, you're a peacekeeper, which basically is a doormat, so that everybody can walk over you, but everybody will be peaceful as they do. All right, so Reuben is a person of compromise. Simeon is a man of anger. His best known escapade was at Shechem, in which he instituted this whole thing of against Shechem, the murder, the death, all that happened there. Levi, on the other hand, he is a protector of Israel. Now, I'm going to go into more when I do the teaching on this, but with Levi, Levi was also with Shimon, but why did he go? There's a lot in this story that we're not told. Was it that Levi was going to try to protect Simeon from himself? I mean, was his plan even worse and something that would put himself into greater danger? I don't know. But Levi, when we look through the rest of Scripture, is the protector of Israel. Now, here's an interesting point, in that both Simeon and Levi are divided up into the tribes. Okay, they're not given their specific entitlement. They are divided into the tribes. What's the reason here? For Simeon, it is for his division into the tribes is for his sake, so that maybe his personality of anger and jumping to everything, jumping to conclusions, will be tempered by the personalities of the other tribes. Levi, on the other hand, is assimilated, if you would, into the tribes for their protection, because Levi is the one that is charged with the duty of helping the tribes in their worship, sacrifices, and walk before the Almighty. Yehuda, Judah, is to be a leader. The lion, okay, the lion of the tribe of Judah. When we see a lion, a picture of a lion, it's known as the king of the forest. All right. The lion is a natural leader, brings forth a place of intimidation, brings forth fear. A lion's roar can pretty much make you melt if you're out in the wood, in the jungles by yourself and you hear this thing. And so Judah is to be one that's a fierce warrior, but at the same time has a protective nature, the same as Levi would, but in a different realm. We look today at Judah, at the Jews. This is not a condemning statement, but it is, I think, a statement of truth. Why? Why is Israel asking the permission of other countries for anything? Okay? A leader doesn't ask permission. A leader leads. But Israel, on the other hand, modern day Israel, the Jews living in Israel, for the most part, the political, I'll put it that way, the political Israel is asking permission. Why? Why should they ask anybody's permission for anything? Well, that's a question that many of us have been asking since October 7th of 2023. Does it look like that's going to change at any time soon with the incoming American administration? No, it doesn't really. Okay, but this is the process. This is all the process when these boys are confronted with who they are. If they look into an honest mirror, then they have the ability to change into or change from the person that they were to the person that the Creator has called them to be. Take, for instance, Reuben. Compromise to, though he is given away the position of firstborn, he can now operate in that. He can still operate in that knowing, well, I'm not going to have that position, but I can still move back into a place that I should have in the beginning. Zebulun, a visionary, living on the seashore. So what does a person do when you're on the seashore is you look out of the horizon. Amazing. It is difficult to go to a beach and not look at a horizon, which is a part of dreaming. The difference between a dream and a vision is a dream remains on. I've got this sign behind me. There you go. Dreams don't work unless you do. The work that's involved is to take a dream and make it into a vision, which is to own it. Is to look out to the sea, to the horizon, and do what you can to guide that ship of dreams into your port, so it becomes your vision, and it is something that you then possess as your own. Issachar is the one who carries the workload. Thankful to people who are called to this. These are the ones you don't have to ask them to do anything. They show up to a congregational meeting with enough for themselves and everybody else, including maybe we had some visitors that day, so I'm going to take a little bit more. You don't have to ask them to volunteer. You don't have to do voluntold. You just simply make a statement and you look over and they're already doing it. Now, as I get into the teaching later on, Issachar has an issue in that they need to learn how to do these things out of joy and not out of guilt for where they perceive they came from. Again, more on that later on. Dan. Dan is the judge. But we see that Dan will be the first one assimilated as we read the scriptures. He will go from his inheritance in the Gaza area, therefore leaving that area for someone else to protect, which is Judah. And since Judah does not have it was not their inheritance to begin with, well, it's easier to give away somebody else's stuff than it is your stuff. The problem that we have in Gaza today is caused by Dan not taking possession of their own inheritance, going up to what is now Tel Dan in the north, and then being assimilated from there. If we go to Revelation chapter 7, we see that as the tribes are listed, that Dan is not there. But when we go to Ezekiel, we see that Dan is brought back in. This is during the millennium. So Dan, who is, let me tell you, needed today, I mean, if there's something we need, is those who would stand up and declare what is right and what is wrong and what are the consequences for making the wrong decisions. This would pretty much shut down most of YouTube and social media. This is why with Dan, he is the one who is the only one that is in a way prayed for. I wait for your deliverance. This is verse 18. I wait for your deliverance, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Dan will be brought back in. It is going to take maybe a time of tribulation. Since it's Revelation chapter 7, will it take a time of tribulation to the point that Dan finally becomes so aggravated at what's going on that Dan stands up and becomes who he was created to be? Gad. Gad's worst enemy is himself, and reminds us of this, that there is strength in getting over yourself. All right? That's kind of an interesting way to put it. But read the verse here in verse 19. And Dan's greatest enemy is Dan's perception of himself. Sometimes our greatest enemy can be our own perception of ourselves. I'll move on before I get too personal there. Asher is the one that gives us hope. All right, bringing forth the royal dainties, the food fit for a king. Asher is the one that when Yeshua was taken to the Har HaBayit, the Temple Mount, he was given to Hannah from the tribe of Asher, who makes this beautiful prophetic prophecy, prophetic word over the baby Yeshua and who he is going to be. And so Asher is the one that in the midst of all of the issues of life tell us redemption is coming. Keep your eye on the future. It's going to get, this is what we need to be looking forward to. We don't need to be focusing as much on the day as we do on our destination. Naphtali, the beautiful fawn, the beautiful doe. A couple days ago, I looked out the window, which is kind of my personality of staring out windows, and most of the people that know me know this. And right outside the fence of our yard, there were two does standing there. And I had not seen them up in that area before. And I said to Kathy, and she walks over, and we're staring out. She says, and Kaya, our dog, wants to go outside. And she doesn't even know they're there yet, but we know what is going to be. And Kathy says, let her out. I want to see that doe as she leaps. There is something about a deer, the gracefulness of a deer, that is jumping. We've got a place up above our house that they'll sometimes we'll walk up on them, and they'll leap over this 5-foot fence, 4-foot fence, and it's just the most graceful thing. That tail goes up in the air, and it's just like they're floating over that fence. The Naphtali reminds us of the freedom. Once the fence is down, and we enter into his kingdom, that it's going to be a time of gracefulness, a time that we can dream of the pasture that's on the other side of this fence called exile. Joseph, the blessings of the covenant. When we read all about all of the things that Joseph is, of all the promises, we understand that everything that is involved here is based upon one word, and that word is covenant. That as we walk in his covenant, that as the words of Deuteronomy 8:10, I think it is, I am giving you wealth in order to establish my covenant. That I really feel like the more we will focus on his covenant, the more the more enriched, and we look at that word wealth, and it's like, well, money in the bank. Okay, that's fine. Maybe it is, but wealth is far greater than money in the bank. There is a richness of life, and I find personally, the more that I will focus on his covenant, the richer my life feels, just on a personal level. And Benjamin, the fruit of a redeemed life. Of course, the two most famous Benjamites are Saul, who would become King Saul, and Shaul, the apostle Shaul. The Gentiles called him Paul. God never changed his name. So Rav Shaul, we see that Rav Shaul was the one who actually fulfilled this, in that in the morning, in the early part of his life, he was devouring the prey, but in the evening he began dividing the spoil, in which we get those wonderful writings of his that most people have taken out of context. Okay, now in verse 33, when Yaakov had finished charging his sons, he drew his legs up onto the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Hebrews chapter 11 gives us another insight into this event. Hebrews chapter 11 says this, by trusting, Yaakov, and this is verse 21, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons. It says blessed, yes. The greatest blessing that a person can give you is the truth. Uncompromised words. Receiving the truth is a blessing. So when Reuben was told, you're a man of compromise, if he received that as truth, it was a blessing that could help to restore his life into what the Creator had in his mind for him. Okay? Just think about that one. Leaning on his walking stick as he bowed in prayer. He was considering his life. It says leaning on his walking stick, his staff, which in that day, I believe, had carvings. It was an autobiography of his life, and he could lean on that, and he could give thanks. Joseph dies then, chapter 50. Joseph dies in exile, but is not carried back. His bones became a witness to the boys. See, Yaakov, his life, his body was taken back to Canaan. But Joseph said, these people need a testimony. They need a witness of where they are, lest they forget totally. I will stay here in exile with them. Oh, I could go into about an hour on that one. The Messiah today, Mashiach ben Yosef, is still with us in exile until it is time for our bones, hopefully with our flesh on them too, to be taken back. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Have a blessed, prosperous week. Bezrat Hashem, God willing. See you again next week. And until then, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.